The Criminal Reptile Empire Exposed in HBO's Monsters of God. Chapter 1. The Suitcase That Broke Open. In August 2010, a damaged suitcase split open at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Inside were 95 boa constrictors, 2 rhinoceros, vipers, and a South American mata mata turtle, all packed in one bag belonging to Anson Wong. The convicted trafficker investigators called the Pablo Escobar of Reptiles. No undercover agent exposed him. His suitcase simply broke. Wong claimed the animals had entered Malaysia legally, and that he was only lacked permission to send them to Indonesia. But American investigators had already linked him to shipments involving commando dragons, endangered tortoises, monitor lizards, and Chinese alligators. What is happening here? Reptiles were allegedly hidden in luggage, mixed with illegal animals, or shipped through FedEx under false descriptions. Wong's network reportedly moved hundreds of protected animals around the world, and he was the only one player in the criminal empire decades in the making. Chapter 2. The Cheese Salesman and the Carpet Dealer. 2 of America's most notorious reptile dealers started in, ordinary jobs. Hank Moult reportedly sold cheese in Philadelphia. Tommy Crutchfield sold carpet in Florida. Then they reinvented themselves as the exotic animal experts capable of finding reptiles that even major zoos couldn't even obtain themselves. After the Endangered Species Act was signed in 1973 and international restrictions tightened, the rarest animals became illegal to import and far more valuable. Moult and Crutchfield became bitter rivals, fighting for money, status, and access to species approaching extinction. According to the HBO, their feud eventually produced a bizarre iguana trafficking case centered on a dead reptile preserved in a jar. What appeared to be a rivalry between obsessive collectors would expose connections stretching from Florida to Madagascar, Belize, Europe, Japan, and Malaysia. Chapter 3. The Dealer Who Supplied Hollywood. Tommy Crutchfield claimed he supplied cobras for Indiana Jones, alligators for the Johnny Carson show, and tortoises to Michael Jackson. But behind those celebrity connections was a growing criminal investigation. Crutchfield and his wife were initially convicted over 4 endangered Fiji banned iguanas, only for an appeals court to reverse the convictions after finding serious misconduct by the prosecutor. Well, Crutchfield escaped that case, but not to the next one. He was later accused of participating in a network that smuggled Madagascar tree boas, ground boas, and exotic turtles. He ultimately admitted involvement in the smuggling of more than 200 reptiles. After learning that he was under investigation in 1997, he fled to Belize, but authorities expelled him, and federal agents arrested him upon his return to Miami. In 1999, Crutchfield pleaded guilty to 7 felon counts and received 30 months in prison. But then the reptiles trade had collided with an even more violent criminal world. Chapter 4. Reptiles and the Cocaine Cowboys. Florida reptile dealer Ray Van Nostrand entered an underground alleged, connected to guns, drugs, and Mario Tabaruri was connected to it all. Prosecutors accused Mario of leading a South Florida drug organization that generated approximately $75 million. After a 4-month trial in 1989, he received a 100-year prison sentence. Testimony also connected him to an attempted to dismember the body of a murdered federal informant with a machete. Mario later cooperated with the authorities and was released later, roughly 12 years later. Then he opened a private wildlife facility and eventually appeared in Tiger King. The overlap between drug trafficking and animal smuggling made sense. The same couriers, corrupted contacts, false documents, and concealed compartments could move all 3. Reptiles were especially valuable contraband, silent, compact, and sometimes worth exponentially more after crossing a border. Chapter 5. 70 tortoises vanished. In 1996, approximately 70 plowshare tortoises disappeared from a breeding project in Madagascar. They were among the rarest tortoises on Earth, meaning every theft pushed the species closer to extinction. Investigators believe some were eventually recovered in the Netherlands. Other accounts describe tortoises disappearing from Madagascar and resurfacing at the Bronx Zoo. The case exposed a disturbing reality. An animal could be stolen from a conservation project, moved through several countries, given convincing paperwork, and eventually sold to an institution supposedly dedicated to protecting wildlife. Author Jeannie Aaron Smith describes zoo curators as becoming both courtroom adversaries adversaries of smugglers and some of their best customers. Publicly, a zoo condemned a trafficker. Privately, it still wanted the impossible animals only the traffickers could provide. Chapter 6. The government became the smuggler. To catch the people running the trade, U.S. Fish and Wildlife agents created a fake reptile company called Packrim. For 3 years, an undercover agent posed as a trafficker and gained the confidence of international dealers. The primary target was Anson Wong. Investigators documented 14 illegal shipments containing approximately 300 protected animals worth nearly $500,000. Some arrived in falsely labeled FedEx packages, others was allegedly concealed among illegal animals. But Wong lived in Malaysia, beyond American extradition, and reportedly said he would never enter the United States. Agents therefore arranged a meeting in Mexico City. On September 14th, 1998, Wong stepped off a plane and was immediately arrested. After fighting extradition for nearly 2 years, he was transferred to San Francisco, pleaded guilty to dozens of felony counts, and received nearly 6 years in prison. Operation Chameleon ultimately produced charges against at least 22 people and exposed a black market spanning 6 continents. This was an international crime. Investigators appeared to have destroyed Wong's entire empire until he returned home. Chapter 7. The suitcase proved nothing changed. After completing his American sentence, Wong returned to Malaysia and resumed selling wildlife. That's all he knows how to do. Insisting everything was now legal though. That's the biggest difference here. Reporters said that local authorities even considered supporting a tiger zoo project that was connected to him. That sounds like a horrible idea. Then his suitcase broke open in 2010. A Malaysian court initially sentenced Wong to only 6 months in jail and imposed a fine of roughly $60,000. Conservation group Trafficking warned that such a weak punishment would convince traffickers they had, so little to fear. Just commit the crime, and if you get caught, no big deal. His sentence was increased, however, to 5 years, then reduced on an appeal. Wong was released after serving approximately 17 months. American agents had spent years infiltrating his network, trafficking international shipments, setting a cross-border trap, and fighting an extradition battle. Yet Wong was caught moving reptiles again because his luggage failed. Chapter 8. The next generation. The criminal trade did not disappear. It changed its paperwork. Decades later, Ray von Nostran's son Michael was prosecuted in another wildlife trafficking case. Investigators said that between 2017 and 2019, Michael van Nostran and his company, Strictly Reptiles, used collectors to capture freshwater turtles from Florida's wildlife and falsely marketed them as captive breed. The deception came down to the code on an export form. On paper, a turtle pulled from a swamp because an animal legally produced in a breeding facility. Investigators documented approximately 3,500 illegally acquired and sold turtles designed for buyers in the United States, China, Japan, and elsewhere. Van Nostran received 7 months in prison and a $100,000 fine. The method had barely changed. Take an animal from the wild, label it as a captive breed, and let paperwork erase where it came from. Chapter 9. The confession. The final twist in The Monsters of God director Eric Goode admits he once participated in this world. He purchased reptiles from dealers including Tommy Crutchfield and now describes himself as having been, part of the problem. Goode later founded the Turtle Conservation and helped breed endangered plowshare tortoises confiscated from smugglers. A $2 million conservation initiative is now attempting to return members of their species to Madagascar. But Goode admits the contradiction never completely disappeared. He still owns tortoises and questions whether they would be better off in the wild. That is the disturbing truth behind Monsters of God. Many traffickers never viewed themselves as a criminal. They believed they were explorers, experts, breeders even, conservationists. Convictions did not end their obsession. Prison did not always stop the trade. Animals stolen for conservation programs could reappear in respected zoos, while thousands of wild turtles become captive breed through a single code on a form. Smugglers called their obsession the fever. Every time a species became rare, the fewer became more profitable. In this criminal empire, extinction was not bad for business. Extinction was the business model.